Justin Boone from The Score. Welcome to the Mind of Mansion program.
What's up, man? I'm glad we're able to do this. I think last year we couldn't find a time, but always fun jumping on with you and talking ball this time of year.
Many years in a row we've done an August show because you just have the rankings so dialed there at The Score, and you're one of my go-to resources for waiver wire advice. Pretty much Theo Greminger from Player Profiler, Justin Boone from The Score. These are the two opinions I weigh the heaviest when making decisions on the waiver wire. And so, yeah, and you've also been one of the top analysts and fantasy rankers at Fantasy Pros for many years. So your opinion is very valuable, and we're very lucky and privileged to have you join us in August most seasons. So we appreciate it. Talk to us about what you're doing at The Score. With you are the head of fantasy there. Just talk to us a little bit about what you're rolling out for content.
Oh, so much stuff right now. Like our fantasy draft kit, the Score Fantasy Draft Kit. You can find it at The Score. You can find it on my Twitter page at Justin Boone. Just loaded with stuff. I'm updating it every single day. It is 100% free. You can thank the Score for that. I'm kind of surprised they continue to put it out for free with everything that we have in there, but lots of stuff. And like I said, the main thing this time of year is just trying to keep the rankings updated, the tiers. I'm working on a Dynasty trade value chart update. I know people have kind of gone crazy about that over the last few seasons. I get more messages about that than I think anything now. Where's that chart? Are you putting it up? You got an update for me? Like, it's really fun. And I've kind of fallen down that Dynasty rabbit hole quite a bit. I love it so much now. We got the Score Fantasy Football Draft Kit, cranking out more episodes there. We just launched the Score NFL show called No Timeouts. You can find that on the Score's YouTube page. So just a ton of stuff this time of year. And we were talking before the show, I'm really ready for the season to get here, but we still have like another week and a half before we get into that groove and kind of on that conveyor belt that takes us through like 4 or 5 months.
That's right, yeah, and the Fast Draft app is live, and we're every day setting records for new users, deposits, and people playing in the Origins and Flex 4 tournaments. Not yet available in Canada for Justin, but as soon as he takes a trip to the United States, hang out with his friends in Chicago, he's going to be loading up some turbo mode orders on Fast Draft. So let's just get right to it. The guy that's been talked about the most this summer is Brandon Aiyuk. I've always had a very difficult time understanding how the 49ers would let him walk. And now it's looking like odds are he's going to end up as a 49er, right?
Sure seems like it, yeah. And it's funny because at the beginning of all this, that's what everyone was saying, right? Like, he's got to stay with the 49ers. He's got to stay with the 49ers. They're never going to let him walk.
Purdy's in his rookie contract for another year or two, and that's it.
All the reporting that was coming out, it was, incredible kind of public negotiating, I would say, by both sides, right? Like, Aiyuk hasn't necessarily maybe gotten himself exactly what he wants. And I think when it comes down to it, does he really want to go to Pittsburgh? Did he really want to go to any of the other teams that were in the mix? I think the best thing for him is staying in San Francisco. And it sure seems like with him at practice, with them asking his teammates like Debo about, can you guys win a Super Bowl without Aiyuk? And Debo kind of hesitating for like 10 or 15 seconds before he was like, I think he's going to stick around here. It's like, okay, like they're talking to him every day when he's out at practice. I'm sure these guys got a feel for it. In the end, he is going to stay in San Francisco. That is the best thing for him. That is the best thing for the 49ers. It's probably the best thing for fantasy too. Like, of the cities that he was talked about going to, I didn't really see one where I was like, oh yeah, his fantasy value is going to just jump up if he goes there. So it's a good thing, I think, if they finally get this done and we don't have to hear about Brandon Aiyuk and trade rumors and contract talks, because there's been just so much of it. Let's get that over with.
Go win a championship. Just go win a championship, man.
Exactly.
You're going to get paid, and you're going to be, you want Russell Wilson, the end years of Russell Wilson in Pittsburgh, across from another perimeter receiver in George Pickens. What are you doing? You want to start over in New England? No, you're not going to do any of that. It's not going to happen. What?
I hope, though, that with his name in the headlines this much, I hope it's like helped elevate his profile, because he's been one of the best receivers in the league for a little while in my mind. And now that he's made so many headlines, now everybody knows who he is, right? Now he is that household name. So hopefully he can go out there and have a great season. And then we can consider him hands down. Everybody, even the casual fantasy players, can view him as that top 10, top 12 receiver in the league, which talent wise, I think he is.
That's a great point. This whole experience, though difficult, right? I'm sure it was difficult for him to constantly be asking these questions, very stressful, teammates blowing up his phone, management blowing up his phone, agent constantly engaged with him, not knowing your future, not knowing where you're going to live. Stressful. But I bet the agent's pitch to him was, this is going to maximize your value. This is going to force the 49ers to pay you what you deserve. And there's an ancillary benefit that it's going to increase your Q score. You're going to be a more well-known player, and you're going to be showing up in a lot more searches, and you're going to be front of mind. And that may help you when negotiating sponsorships and endorsement deals. So he could, because of this, because he's been front and center in NFL news for months and months, that's an interesting point. This could actually be a lucrative maneuver for him, even though I'm sure it wasn't pleasant to get, to work your way through it.
Well, he also doesn't have to participate in training camp, which you wonder how much that factors in with these guys, right? CeeDee Lamb and Jamar Chase and everybody that's negotiating the contracts. Keep that, level that you want up. Keep that number really high. And if you are willing to come down, let's come down at the end of August when we don't have to go through those grueling training camp and preseason practices.
Now, the guy that's been running with the ones in San Francisco is not Ricky Pearsall. It's not Brandon Aiyuk. It's Juwan Jennings. There's going to be a week where Juwan Jennings is number one on your waiver wire column. You know it. I know it.
He's no Tim Patrick. Come on now. Tim Patrick, that's the guy who's got my heart when it comes to the waiver wire column.
I think he's a heart stealer. I believe that we could be in a situation where you're like, really, we're doing this again with Juwan Jennings, people? Come on.
I have a hard time believing that. I don't know. I think his role in that offense is because he's so good at run blocking. PFF, he was the third best run blocking receiver by their grades last year.
That's right.
I think that's his big role in the offense. And I think if anybody misses time, whether it's Debo, whether it's Kittle, whether it's Aiyuk, whether it's CMC or whatever, and we're looking for who else is going to step up, there's other names in the offense that I think would do it ahead of him. And even if you're talking about the receiving core, it's Pearsall. It's also Jacob Cowing, their other rookie receiver who's getting a lot of buzz. He was injured at the start of training camp. He's back out there now. People really like him in San Francisco. So I think if we're talking about fantasy wise, who would step up if guys were missing time or if Aiyuk wasn't there, which like we said, we assume he's going to be, I think it would be Pearsall. I think it would be Cowing. And I think, of course, if one of those top four of CMC or Kittle or Debo or Aiyuk misses time, you still have three pretty amazing guys that can pick up that volume. But if we're looking for who else down the depth chart could do it, it's not Jennings to me. I think he'll continue to play, and he's going to have games. He's going to have games where he scores a touchdown or two touchdowns, and people will chase him.
Play. It's not a talent play. It's a system play, Justin.
I won't be the guy chasing him. I'll be the one going out and picking up Cowing or someone else off the waiver wire for much cheaper.
Let's remember this conversation happened. Let's remember this conversation because I know you, man. I know you're going to be faced with the hard target share numbers. You're going to be looking down at it, and you're going to be like, I remember that conversation with the Podfather. I remember it very well. And God damn it.
So when people are asking why is Jennings... How come Juwan Jennings isn't in your...
you typing Cowing and then just backing it out?
No, I mean, I would, out of spite, I would not put him in there now. Come on, after this conversation.
Out of spite? I don't know, man. You're oh God, you're so hyper rational when it comes to waiver wire. I'd like to see it. I'd like to see you go emotional for once, but I doubt it happens.
When I'm running it down all the way to the guys that are 0% rostered for those real degenerates in those leagues, there'd be no way that I couldn't keep his name out of that column. But whether he'll be one of the guys that gets featured, that I kind of doubt.
It's a system play. It's a system play, and it's my part of my elaborate Ricky Pearsall fade. I'm also fading Elijah Mitchell, which is not difficult because he hasn't been practicing or playing in preseason at all. Jordan Mason recently nicked up, but previously getting a lot of buzz, a lot of positive reviews from the coaching staff. This feels like, to me, in your traditional leagues with your friends, this seems like the guy, especially if it's deeper. There's some leagues with buddies. It's like 14 team, 16 team.
For sure.
I feel like that's the guy to get in the final rounds. It's got to be Jordan Mason.
I think that's a great call. Like, absolutely. And a lot of it for me now is based on what we're hearing from the beat writers and from people around the team, that he's looked so good this offseason. But I think you had to like, what he put on film the first couple of years out there. He has that like really aggressive running style. He had some good numbers too. Like, you go back to his rookie year, he's had very limited snaps. He hasn't really had like run as the starter for several games. It's always kind of been limited, or, as a second half of the game guy when the 49ers are up. But in that rookie season, he had 3 games in a row where he topped 50 yards in each game, was very efficient. And like I said, with very limited touches in those contests. Last year, he had a game with 10 carries, had 69 yards and a touchdown. That was in week 5 against the Cowboys. Week 18 went out 7 touches for 48 yards. So when he's gotten a chance, I mean, surprise, surprise, when a running back gets a chance in the 49ers system in that Shanahan rushing attack, oh, he's productive. He put up stats. Like, that's not going to shock anybody. But for sure, Mason is a guy that I think you could target really late. People are not on to him. And in the league that before the show, you and I were joking around, I was mentioning one of my home leagues that I drafted in this weekend. I did the exact move that we talked about, which was drafting Jonathan Brooks, taking Jonathan Brooks immediately after the draft and putting him in my IR spot, which you can do. And Jordan Mason didn't even get picked in the final round. He was still out there in the waiver wire. And 2 days later, he was on my team for free. So I think those are moves that you got to be considering this time of year, ways that you can use those extra roster spots, because it's an advantage. If you have a guy on IR and now you're rostering 2 players versus 1, that's an advantage, especially if a guy like Christian McCaffrey, which I think, the calf injury is a little overblown right now. I think because it's the preseason, they're just sitting him down. There's no reason to risk him, right? Let's get him healthy. They've kind of said that too. If there was a game right now, he'd be out there playing, but he's had a lot of volume. He's getting a little bit older. Is that time going to come when he gets nicked up and the 49ers need to turn to somebody else? Well, if they do, I think Mason can be productive in that offense.
I mean, we forget because we're so focused on underdog and best ball for so many months that in traditional leagues, you got to get a guy like a Nick Chubb. You got to get a guy like a Jonathan Brooks because you can slide him right into your IR spot, and then there's Jordan Mason undrafted, boom, every time. And these micro tactics, these Jordan Masonian micro tactics, these end up being the difference in these hyper-competitive leagues. That's what happens. Welcome to the Mind of Mansion program, the one-man band and one of the great rankers and waiver wire artists from the Score. He's here with me today as he is every August. He brings it. One of the smartest guys in all of fantasy, a true fantasy pro, on the top of those rankings every single year. With me today it is Justin Boone. Talk to me.
I love it, man. I think, this is one of the most fun shows to do. It's also one of the longest shows in the industry to do, but that's because you ask great questions. I think the first time I came on your show, you sent me show notes and there was about 40 or 50 questions on it. And I just broke out laughing and I was like, well, there's no point in making notes. We're just going to talk then. Let's do this. Right. So it's really fun this time of year when there's so many different things that we can discuss when we're in the heart of draft season, man. Like, I do just want to get to the season, but there's still a long way to go. We're going to have cuts a week from now. What's going to happen there? How many guys are going to change teams? Veteran running backs getting cut. Could we see the Cowboys get somebody else that's going to take over that backfield? Like, I can't wait to find that stuff out as much as I am excited to kind of just get to week 1 after we've been paying attention and going over all the stuff all off season.
So which of these minor injuries we talked about, in the pre-show, Elijah Mitchell, which of the minor injuries that is being downplayed by coaches, Which of those do you believe is actually more serious than is being revealed?
The one that I'm concerned about, and I'm rocking the hat right here, is Curtis Samuel. Like, to just find out now that he has turf toe, and I know they're saying he's week to week. We still got a couple weeks before the season, but man, turf toe for a receiver like him that relies on like that short area quickness, it's kind of concerning. And I know people are trying to dissect, like, what Sean McDermott actually said. And, he suggested he's week to week. And when he said guys were week to week in the past, maybe that just wasn't, a huge injury. And those guys came back after a couple weeks, where his wording, if a guy is going to be out longer than that, was saying that he's going to be out weeks. Some of the beat writers are trying to break that down. I think that might be a little too cute, trying to read between the lines. Because, yeah, I think right now, week 1, is he going to be out there? I probably don't think so. And when he does come back, how much is this going to affect him? And the Bills will be okay. Like, they've kind of built this offense to be able to spread the ball around, to be able to, use kind of everybody that they have, but they don't have a lot of depth at receiver right now. So if you lose somebody like Samuel, who I was very excited about, I don't know how you feel, but like, getting to, get back together with Joe Brady, the OC in Buffalo, after he had his career year under Brady when they were in Carolina together, I was interested to see what he could do in this offense. I've taken a lot of shares of him in drafts. So I am worried about that one for sure, even though, like I said, not so much worried about the Bills overall, because I think they have those other weapons. I think Dalton Kincaid is the guy there who's going to lead them in targets this year. I think Khalil Shakir is very underrated. And Keon Coleman, we'll see what happens with him. Like, it might take some time for him to actually come around, because I think, and we talked about this a bit before the show, I think what the Bills are trying to do is exactly what the Chiefs did last year. They have their Kelsey and Kincaid, or at least they hope so, and I kind of think that they do. Then, okay, what's next? They need a Rashee Rice. Can Keon Coleman be that guy? I'm looking at him this year as somebody that I don't know if he's going to be able to produce big numbers early in the season, but maybe like Rashee Rice, as the year goes along, he'll be able to come along and actually start to put up some big stats. And then after that, you kind of just have a collection of interesting guys, and you rely on your quarterback to get the job done and spread the ball around and, run for hopefully a big touchdown total and keep things moving there. And I think Allen's going to be able to do it. And that defense is very concerning now that they lost all those veteran guys, now that they've lost Matt Milano. So it's really going to be all on Josh Allen this season. But we know he's a Superman. He can pull that off.
Josh Allen could have bigger numbers this year than he ever had with Stephon Diggs, simply because the defense is much worse. And then that translates into more pass attempts and more targets for Dalton Kincaid, who I think will outproduce Sam Laporta and every other tight end in the league. Because it looks like the Bills are trying to copy the Chiefs. They lose to the Chiefs every year, and they're like, enough already. Whatever they're doing, do it, right? Like, you can see, like, the management, the equity holders coming down and whatever they're doing, do it. Get yourself a Kelsey, whatever they're doing, spread the ball around. Draft a receiver like Rashee Rice at the 1-2 turn to just do what they're doing. And so I could, why wouldn't Dalton Kincaid, given his talent profile, he should be the next Kelsey. Last year it was Laporta. We're not drafting for last year. I know last year it was Laporta. We're drafting for this year, Justin.
But last year, like, his season, I know Laporta overshadowed him. There were other guys. But last year, like, for a rookie tight end to have 73 catches and almost 700 yards, I know the touchdown total wasn't great, but he showed us plenty last year. And from week 7 on, he was a tight end 11 in fantasy points per game. And that was with Diggs still out there. And I know Diggs' numbers dropped a bit as the year went along. But when we're looking for these fantasy tight ends, the guys that could explode, often it happens in a situation where they are the number 1 or number 2 target getter in their offense. And there are not many tight ends out there who could be that number 1 target getter. Dalton Kincaid right up there with the top names on that list of guys that could do it this year. So I want to chase that all day for fantasy.
I mean, the odds are, given how good Zay Flowers is, the odds are that Dalton Kincaid is his target leader on his team over Mark Andrews. It's more probable that Kincaid leads the Bills in targets, then Andrews leads the Ravens in targets, just because there's no one like Zay Flowers on the Bills. The closest thing to Zay Flowers on the Bills is Khalil Shakir. And he's been my favorite wide receiver to draft on the Bills, then Curtis Samuel, and then a distant all the way down to maybe never Keon Coleman. I'm happy to pick up Keon Coleman on the waiver wire after he bagels in the first 2 weeks, right? And I can get
Certainly
to feel
could
for
be
it.
one of those guys, yeah.
You don't need to be a hero, right? You don't need to push your chips in before the flop. You can let it play out, right? You can let it play out with Quentin Johnston. You can let it play out. And if you see, oh, this guy's not separating, oh, this guy can't squeeze the football, this guy's running the wrong routes, you got to give him a year to develop. Okay, then we'll do that. But you don't need to invest all the mid-round capital on that guy. You just wait a couple rounds and you can get Shakir and he'll out-target Keon Coleman. And then we see on Hard Knocks, we have the pleasure of the Bears playing the Bills. And then we get to watch a little bit of, if you notice, number 0 was in there and was getting absolutely bodied to a ridiculous extent. In fact, here is a photograph from the Bears-Bills preseason game. This is a photograph of Keon Coleman. See if you can identify where Keon Coleman is in this photograph. Here's the photograph. Okay.
Incredible.
Now, if you see that his leg there, okay, because the ball is headed right into the hands of the Bears defender, and you can see a bit of Keon Coleman's helmet. You can see his left hand and a foot, and his entire body is being blockaded by a single Bears defender in the back of the end zone. I think we're going to see a lot of this. And just you can see how his hands are kind of just up in the air going, hey, I got nothing here. And I think we're going to see some of this season, and it's going to be embarrassing.
But I also think that we didn't expect him to come in and be Marvin Harrison Jr. or Malik Neighbors or one of these kinds of guys, right? Like, he's going to take time. I think when they drafted him, we knew that, right? So that's why my hope, and maybe it's the Bills fan in me, but like you said, I'm very pragmatic with this stuff. I'm very logical about it. And I think he needs to learn how to win in the NFL. How is he going to be able to do it with his skill set, with his athleticism? How is he going to be able to win against NFL DBs? And that might take a week. It might take a month. It might be the second half of the season. But I think he'll be giving the Bills something. Whether that's great for fantasy, might not be in year one.
It's a horse race between Ricky Pearsall, Xavier Legette, and Keon Coleman. Who can get to 200 yards? Who can get to 200 receiving yards? It's a horse race. They were all drafted within 5 picks of each other, right? Similar body types, auxiliary, perimeter receivers, clashers. They go up and get it for first downs. In theory, we'll see who can do it. We'll see who can get to 200 yards first. And if you add up the receiving yards of all 3 of those guys, Legette, Pearsall, Coleman, together in aggregate, they will have fewer receiving yards than Ladd McConkey.
That's rough. I mean, if you're putting, Coleman against those other two, and Pearsall talented, but Pearsall not having not going to have the opportunity this year unless there's injuries. If you put him up against those two, I mean, I'm emptying the bank account just to put all of it down on Coleman beating them this year. Just based on opportunity alone.
I think he will. So I think we'll get 400 yards from Coleman. We'll get 200 yards from Pearsall. We'll get 70 yards from Legette, and then we'll get like 850 yards from Ladd McConkey, and Ladd McConkey will ship it. That's it. That's how we get there with Ladd McConkey. Is that a hot take? Chat, let me know. Do you think that's a hot take? It doesn't feel that hot to me. It might be hot. I don't know. Let me know. See if it's hot. Dalton Kincaid, tight end 1. What's hotter? Dalton Kincaid, tight end 1, or McConkey outscoring the aggregate of Coleman, Legette, and Pearsall? Now, the buzz on Kenneth Walker is he's catching passes, and this is going to be a big year for Seattle. They're going to have to play fast in that division. That division's going to be bananas. That division's going to be fireworks. So I'm excited about that. And that means a lot of touches for Walker. It also means there's going to be a lot of pass plays, a lot of leaking out of the backfield, a lot of easy catches for him. What do you think about Walker this year?
I mean, I've moved him up a bunch. I believe the talk from the coaching staff here that they think he is that 3-down guy, that they want to give him that opportunity. And I say that as someone who likes Zach Charbonnet too. Like, I was hopeful that Zach Charbonnet would be able to carve out a role, and with the new coaching staff, it kind of resets things, but it can reset things in any direction. And apparently it's resetting things in the way of Walker getting a ton of work. And we know the talent's there. I mean, the last 2 seasons, top 20 running back and fantasy points per game and half PPR. Last year was a down year, and he still pulled that off. The year before, when you had Geno Smith's breakout, when things were going really well, when the line overachieved, he came out as the RB14 in fantasy. And then last season, they lose the tackles early in the year. That's why they end up kind of struggling a little bit. Now we have this new coaching staff. I really like Ryan Grubb and what he could bring to this offense. Their head coach is saying that they want to give Kenneth Walker as much work as they possibly can. I believe it. I think the offensive line is going to have better health this year. And even if Abe Lucas can't play, they went out and got George Fant. So they got some depth at the tackle position where hopefully it doesn't all fall apart in week 1 like it did last year. I'm really hopeful about this offense, and we know that Walker has the talent. So if the touches are there, boom, I definitely want him on my team, and I think he's got a shot to be an RB1 in fantasy this season. I'm willing to take him in the 4th round now, and he's starting to sneak up into that range ADP-wise.
So Walker over Rachaad White?
Walker over Rachaad White.
Oh, baby, that's a tough one for me.
I mean, I'm always dealing in half PPR, and PPR you might be able to make a stronger case for White, but
right.
I think talent-wise, Walker is the much better player. So if he has a shot to get the kind of volume that we think he might be able to get, then yeah, give me Walker.
Oh, one of my favorite fantasy analyst cop-outs right there, that I'm going to use it because I've been struggling with this. Now I'm going to use it. In PPR White, have PPR Walker. Gotcha. I get to have it both ways. Thank you very much. What do you think of this acronym? Okay. JSZN. What do you think?
I like it. Let's get the shirts printed.
You like that? You want board with that?
I don't think they can get you for copyright. I think you're going to be fine. Let's get those shirts printed.
Yep. I just posted it in all the chats. You guys can like that. Also, like the show. Like the show, gets it out to more people. I promise if you like it, other people like you will find it and then join the chat, and we'll make the chat an even more wild place. Your league mates are not going to find this show. Okay, trust me. You like it, you subscribe to it, your league mates aren't going to find it, but other people like you will find it. Trust me. Your league mates are lame. There's no way they would get this show, but other cool people will get it if you like it. So that's the move.
I have a lot of friends from back home every year when I come on this show who message me after, oh my God, I heard you on there. Oh man. So you have a lot of smart followers out there, and a couple of them happen to be friends of mine from back home.
Oh yes. You have one of the great home leagues in the history of fantasy football. You had, I believe, Gilbert Godfrey do a smack talk video the year you won.
I did. I got invited to a league with some of my high school buddies and some of their friends from college and university. And I've told this story on my podcast before, but they tried their best to stop me from winning a title. They didn't want to trade with me. I had to always overpay if I was trying to get players. We had, I think, maybe 4 or 5 seasons went by where I would make it to the finals and lose. I'd make it to the semifinals and lose. And I kept having these really good teams every year. Finally, I got over the hump, won the title, and I wanted to do something to put it back on everybody. I went to Cameo. I tried to figure out who would be the best comic who could do it. And Gilbert Gottfried, RIP, he was still alive at the time. He did just an incredible roast of the league. I put a couple inside jokes in there. You only have so much space to give him ideas of what to say.
Right.
So after I put a couple inside jokes, listed the names of everybody in the league, and I said, just go to town. And he did a great job with it. Unfortunately, it's not something that we can share on social media. No. There'd be a lot of bleeps we'd have to put in there, but it was really funny, and the league really enjoyed it.
You probably went something like this. Danny drafted Josh Allen in round 1 and finished in last place, which is exactly where he deserves to finish. Something like that.
I should have known of all people that you would have a Gilbert Godfrey impression in your back pocket.
No one competes with Justin Boone this year. Anyway, Tim Patrick.
If I need another one, I know who to come to for the fake Gilbert Godfrey impression.
Or just I could do a roast. I could do my own roast. I could do just a Podfather roast. No problem. Absolutely. If you strike out on Cameo and there's no good ones, I'll do one for free. I have no problem doing that. I would love it. That would be my pleasure. Because of all the help you've given me, with on the waiver wire. Again, you and Theo are the best. So Tim Patrick is your favorite waiver wire pickup of all time. In your waiver wire column, he was number 1 for like 5 straight weeks, and you were clearly exasperated by this whole phenomenon that no one was picking him up.
Yeah.
The ownership just never caught up, and you're like, what is going on? This guy's putting up 10 fantasy points per game every week. Now we see he's back healthy. He's now in his 30s, just like Adam Thielen is. He's looking good. Bo Nix looking good.
Yeah. I mean, every year.
Bo Nix to Patrick. Who says no?
In Dynasty rookie drafts, I feel like every year there's a quarterback that everyone for some reason is down on and falls way farther than he should. And Bo Nix very well might have been that guy this year. Patrick, it's so funny because this is like the first year in a long time that I was not touting him and watch him go out and have like the career season, right? Like, and it's because all the injuries. Like, of course, we're looking at what happened in the last couple seasons. It was an ACL 2 years ago. It was an Achilles last year.
Oh.
You figure, given his age, they're probably going to move on. They're going to find other guys, and yet somehow he sneaks back out there. And if people like forget what this guy can do, like you go back to 2020, Cortland Sutton missed a little bit of time that season. But Patrick was a top 30 fantasy wideout from weeks 3 to week 14. Had a stretch in there where he had 100 yards and or a touchdown in 7 straight games. That was probably the exact time when I kept screaming at everybody to pick him up because you could put him right in your lineup. Then in 2021, 85 yards and or a TD in 8 of his 16 games that year. And yet he continued to be available in the majority of fantasy leagues. I didn't get it. That being said, with the builds that I'm doing this year, I don't have a lot of Tim Patrick. I don't know if people should really be out there getting him. Like, I'm recommending that people should be trying to solidify that receiving core early in their drafts. Maybe you take a shot on like one receiver a little bit later for a depth piece or a flex guy. But I'm not normally taking receivers when we get to the point in the draft where Tim Patrick is available, which tends to be the very late rounds, of course. But I know people might get excited. He caught a touchdown, the preseason here. He's back, and maybe they remember some of those articles that I wrote in the waiver wire pieces. But I don't know. Do we really need to go all the way down to Tim Patrick? Aren't we going to have better receiving cores than that?
Of course. Tim Patrick is a best ball floor play. That's exactly what Tim Patrick is. You want to draft Tim Patrick, draft him in the final rounds of underdog, especially on builds where you have less wide receivers than your average build, and you want to just lock in targets on a weekly basis. Then that's what Tim Patrick, that he has. Everyone has a role, right? Just like the Lord of the Rings, when Gandalf was talking about Gollum, he's like, everyone has a part to play in this story, Frodo. And Tim Patrick has a part to play. He has no part in traditional leagues that you're drafting, managed leagues, because you're loading up in the first 5 rounds. You're probably going to draft 3 to 4 or 5 receivers. And then you're going to go ahead and get all your running backs for the rest of the draft. You're going to be drafting running backs all the way through to Jordan Mason. That's what you're going to be doing. And then week 1's going to happen, and we're going to see what injuries manifest, and there always are running back injuries every week, and then some of those things are going to be hits, and some of those running backs are going to be misses, and you're going to go ahead and drop them, and you're going to pick up some other running backs, and you're going to keep churning through running backs until you've found 3 or 4 or 5 starters that you can trust on a weekly basis if you keep playing that game. And then the wide receiver waiver wire is there if you experience injuries, right? If you experience injuries, then we're going to go ahead and potentially stream a Tim Patrick in a matchup. he has that utility. You can go grab him in week 4 or 5 and stream him as needed, but you're not going to clog up your bench with fringe wide receivers or receivers that are super volatile where you never know when to start them, like Darnell Mooney. They're too frustrating to even have in a managed league. Don't even bother. Just sidestep those guys. When your instinct is to draft another receiver, just like, I gotta have a bench receiver. No, you don't. No, you don't. You can always stream a receiver if you need to. And there's a guy like Tim Patrick available every week. And I know this because I do my own waiver wire analysis every week, and we see it every week. So don't worry about it. Well, some of the best builds that I see are just create a starting lineup and then just running backs.
You clearly looked at my teams. That's the majority of my redraft teams.
I mean, you don't even need to know any players, right? It's very similar to poker where you don't even have to look at your cards, right? There are certain moves that the high-level players make where they're not even looking at their cards. They just are looking at the board and they're looking at the other players and they know what moves to make, and then and they could take it down with 7-2. That's the level. And that's like such an easy cheat code. You can get the structure right knowing nothing about the players that underlie it. So you first get the structure right. Now it's a question of, okay, who are you shopping for in particular rounds? If you're shopping for running back in round 1, there's only maybe 2 guys you would consider. I am too nervous to draft Breece Hall in round 1. I've talked about this. In round 2, 3, 4, it gets very squishy. Now in round 4, Kenneth Walker in half PPR, interesting. Rachaad White in PPR, interesting. We're talking about a handful of running back options here, where in round 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all the way through to the end, there's like 3 or 4 guys you want.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. Like, I did a late round episode, like my favorite late round targets recently, and I didn't really spend too much time on quarterback. There was like 1 or 2 guys because, there's basically like 12 or 13 good quarterbacks this year. You don't really have to go into the late rounds to get one of those. Receiver, it's very difficult to find like that Puka Nacua that's going to come from the late rounds and be this like superstar talent on your team and make a huge difference.
No, but
it's a lot more the guys that you just described, the guys that
You
could
and I
step
want
in as
those.
a 1 week replacement.
We want the Puka Nacuas. I want to be very clear. People like Justin and I love the Puka Nacuas because what it leads to is more late round wide receiver drafting every year, chasing that dragon. And we know to stay out of that game.
And when I did that episode, I started laughing at one point because I was just spending so much time on running back. The running back list for like late round targets, it's like almost everyone, right? Like there's only like a few guys that you don't want to draft at that point. For the most part, you want to shoot those shots and take those dart throws on all of those backups that have pretty high upside, that are 1 injury away. A couple of them have a chance to potentially even take over their backfields at some point this year, but most of them you're looking for a talented player that if his opportunity comes, he is going to cash for you. And there's a lot of guys in that range this year. There's a lot of rookies in that range this year that I think people should be targeting too.
Tyrone Tracy, Ray Davis,
Braylon Allen. There's the Marshawn Lloyds. There's so many guys in that range this year that you can go after. I mean, Blake Corum's a little bit higher, I think. Trey Benson. Like, there are a lot of rookies across all positions. I had somebody ask me recently, like, is it strange that we're hearing so much talk about this rookie class and how good these guys could be and everything? And I was like, no, this was a really good rookie class across the board. So when you end your draft this year, don't look at your team and be worried like, oh my God, I took that many rookies. I think your team's going to be pretty good if you took the right rookies. And this year, that's a lot of them. We don't have to like get too specific. There's a few receivers at the top that are incredible. There's other receivers along the way that are going to be able to pop off and have great seasons as well. And when we're talking about running backs and you get down into the depth, there are a lot of those guys that are stepping into those number 2 roles. It's these rookies that are going to be able to pay off.
Dylan Lobby is impressing, which isn't a surprise to anybody. And then we hear nothing for months about Kamani Vidal, and then all of a sudden, he looks good in a preseason game. He's getting a ton of carries, ton of work.
Such a weird one.
In the first half even. Okay. Go, dude. Like, is it one of those things where the coaches were quietly trying to just keep a lid on this Kamani Vidal because, A, they're worried about losing him getting poached if they try to put him on the practice squad for a couple weeks. They don't want that to happen. Or they just, want to unleash him at some point in the game and not have anyone thinking about him or scheming against him. Or was it just that he wasn't impressing? I can never know. I never know. Is it that they're intentionally not mentioning him because they're trying to keep their cards held close to the vest, or they legitimately didn't impress anyone in practice? I don't know.
I could see like an old school coaching staff like that, like Harbaugh, like that could even be like a motivational tactic where they're trying to challenge him to see how good he can be and force him to work his way up. Like when he's behind like Jared Patterson on the depth chart, that was a little bit concerning, but he's got a very good shot after that performance this week to be the RB3 in that offense. And that's behind two veterans that have a long history of injury problems. One of them coming off an Achilles tear that, like, I don't know how people are that excited about Dobbins. If J.K. Dobbins comes back and puts up a good season this year, it will be absolutely incredible, like almost never done before. And they did not pay him very much. He does not have very much guaranteed money. For a long time there, I was looking at him as a guy that like could potentially just get cut at the end of the summer. Now, I don't know if they're going to do that. And Greg Roman has a history with both Gus Edwards and with Dobbins. So maybe they're going to try to take them into the season. But it's really hard for me to believe that J.K. Dobbins is going to be anything close to what he's been at the top of his game before, because guys coming off Achilles tears, it takes 2 years, sometimes longer, and sometimes they never get it back. So you hope that, medical procedures have gotten better and that, they figured out something for him. But just because a guy's back on the field too, and we saw this with Cam Akers a couple years ago, guy tears his Achilles. Amazing that Cam Akers was back out there like 6 months later, but he didn't look like himself. He didn't look great. He was on the field. He was able to play, but he wasn't back to form. I worry that that's what we're going to see with Dobbins this year. And that's the reason to go after a guy like Kamani Vidal still.
Yeah, I'm now back on Kamani. I was worried he was going to be a cut candidate. I admit that I was concerned about this Jared Patterson. Again, Jared Patterson, we've seen him make big plays, right? We've seen him come in and look more explosive than his athleticism would suggest.
Very productive in college,
for example. And so this isn't a guy that we've never seen, do anything, right? He has actually flashed in the league. So a guy that's flashed and is still young, I'm like, okay, this is conceivable, right? I could totally see this. And with Dobbins, he has enough explosiveness that even if it's degraded, he goes from running
Dobbins.
a 4.4 flat to, okay, now he runs a 4.55, but that's still, plenty of explosiveness and, lateral agility that he has, that he could be effective in the league. It's interesting. Like I don't know what's going to happen, but it's worth taking shots on a guy like Vidal late, especially now that we know, okay, he is getting run with the ones in preseason. He looks like an efficient runner. This is a big question that's been answered now with Vidal.
Yeah, and I'll say, like, there's a price where I'm willing to take almost everybody, right? And in a recent draft, in the final 2 rounds, I took Vidal and I took Dobbins 1 round later because he was still on the board, and just hope that between the Greg Roman rushing attack there, between the investments that they have in that offensive line, the assumption that they are going to try to establish the run in that offense this year, I'm willing to take shots and see if we can get something in that Chargers backfield, especially when we're talking about the 14th or 15th round and guys that you very well may just drop within the first, week or two and pick up those hot names off the waiver wire. But I want to see what's going to happen in this Chargers offense because they need to try to run the ball. Who's going to do it? Like, it's going to have to be somebody, and everybody's got a shot, I think, in those top 3 based on those durability concerns with Edwards and with Dobbins. So I also had like some worries about Vidal because we had like almost every beat writer saying that like, oh, is he going to make the team? Not so sure. And then a week later, he's back out there and producing. So I'm back in on him, and you can grab him very, very late, in part because a lot of people don't know who he is, and in part because, the situation that we had for a couple weeks there where wasn't really playing, wasn't getting those preseason highlights that normally vault a guy up the rankings. So hopefully he can come through this year.
Yeah, they were radio silence about Vidal, total juke out. I mean, can't forget. It's Joe Alt, Sean Slater, one of the best offensive lines in the sport. Can't forget that with the Chargers. And one of these years, they're not going to be ravaged by injury, and there's just going to be wide running lanes. It's going to be you have to invest in these guys. And that would be the reason to go Vidal over a guy like Dylan Lobby. I think Dylan Lobby's a better player. I think he's better for fantasy as, already an elite pass catcher among running backs. But the situation is much better for Vidal, where you can see him, seizing a true every down role. Whereas it's not like Lobby is going to crowd out Zamir White inside the 10. That's never going to happen, right? But you could see Vidal becoming the guy much faster than you could see Lobby becoming the guy, regardless. Like even in Dynasty, one of my patron shows, I remember, patreon.com/podfather, do the backstage pass, and I did a study of all of my teams, and I went through like 12 Dynasty teams. I was like, look at back through time. Look at all these rookie drafts. And I circled all of the receivers that I drafted in these rookie drafts in rounds 3, 4, 5. And then I listed the next two running backs that I could have drafted. And it was like 9 out of 10 times drafting that running back in the second half of a Dynasty rookie draft was just a mistake. But Puka Nacua will consistently keep people coming back. The presence of that one guy, that one siren song receiver in rookie drafts will keep people coming back and continue to make the Vidals available in rookie drafts.
Yeah, and then people end up holding those receivers that they got deep in their dynasty rookie drafts for a while because they don't want to give up on them right away.
Can't.
And then they clog that roster for a season or two, which again is an advantage for the managers not going that route.
You're clogging it up, man. You're clogging it up. Now, Jaylen Warren is a great example of a running back that didn't even get drafted in rookie drafts. He was undrafted, right? But he was the perfect guy to pick up and stash in dynasty.
Sure.
That's the guy you're looking for. And then, of course, the year that he's primed for a breakout, he's missing preseason. So what do you think is going to happen with Jaylen? How do you see that backfield in Pittsburgh playing out?
It's a tough one. I would say that of all the backfields out there that we have to break down, this is the one that I feel like the least confidence in my outlook for. I kind of have no idea what Arthur Smith is going to do. And part of that might be just the Arthur Smith of it all, and knowing that any given week he could give touches to anybody on the roster, and we could see Cordell Patterson have a big game. And I think Arthur Smith actually gets a bad rap for his time in Atlanta. I know he does those weird decisions, especially around the goal line and who he's given touches to. But what he did in Atlanta, I think, was in part because of how bad that quarterback situation was, right? Like the Desmond Ritters of it all. He was kind of behind it, trying to figure out what they could accomplish having.
Of course, you're going to run a trick player too,
and right? He just had no faith in the quarterbacks, and for good reason. We saw what ended up happening there. Regardless, if you go back to his time as the offensive coordinator in Tennessee, and of course he had Derrick Henry, which did a lot of the heavy lifting, but he is able to produce a pretty good rushing attack. So there can be value here. I'm willing to take shots on these two guys. But if you wanted me to figure out exactly how I feel about them, how is this going to look this year? I don't have the answer for this one. And I'm always going to be honest about that. If I don't have a good feel, I'm going to tell you this is one of those situations. So you're still taking shots on them, but it's taking a shot and hoping because the Steelers' offensive line is a little better, because that offense in general is going to be a little bit better, because they're going to have better quarterback play than what they've had the last couple seasons with Kenny Pickett and whatnot, Mitch Trubisky and those guys. that would be the reason to take a shot on them. Now, the injury does kind of complicate things, and I hate when it's like a hamstring for a skill position player. And that kind of stuff can linger, and it can get aggravated, and it can be a problem for a while. But
It's no good.
assuming that Warren's back early in the season, he's going to be a really good value in drafts, and that's going to make me take even more of him here over the next couple weeks.
I wouldn't do that.
You don't think so? You think he's going to be out for a while?
It depends on how far he falls, but Najee Harris is the starter. Najee Harris is the team leader, the team captain. He's the guy that's in a contract year. And I can't see Mike Tomlin betraying a guy like Najee Harris. I can't see that happening. So,
I don't think the suggestion is that he's going to betray him. I don't think that
there's anything wrong with just closing your eyes and taking the gross pick of Najee Harris.
I think it's going to be a split one way or the other. The question is, like, when it's a split and it's close to 50-50, who is the guy you want? Is it Najee Harris because the potential touchdown scoring? Is it Warren because he's going to be the more explosive player, assuming that he's healthy? That's what it comes down to there. I don't think it's like a situation where all of a sudden Warren's going to be leading the backfield 70-30 or something. Like that seems very unrealistic. But again, I guess Arthur Smith, we never know.
Warren's going to have weeks, and I think he's more of a best ball running back. It's going to be hard to ever start him if Harris is healthy. And because then you've got him with Cordell Patterson in there, and then the offense just is going to be anemic in general. You got to think about what scenarios would I actually start this guy when you go to draft a running back. And I know week 1 I can start Najee Harris. I don't know what week I could ever start Jaylen Warren, but that doesn't mean Jaylen Warren's not a great play. Like in Dynasty, I like Jaylen Warren in Dynasty. You can't trade him now. The thing with these injuries is you can't trade a guy like Jaylen. You can't trade Warren now and sell low. That doesn't make any sense. So if you have Jaylen Warren in Dynasty, I have a lot more Dynasty Warren and seasonal Harris. So just put him on the bench, and then if you are thinking about trading Warren at all, he is going to give you a spike week. Trust me. He's going to have a spike week. He's going to have a 25-point week. He's going to have at least one big, long touchdown run. Wait for that week, especially if you have Najee Harris with a shoulder injury, right? And he's questionable. We don't know if he's going to start or not. And Warren just comes off a big game. Boom, on the block. Jaylen Warren. That's when you get out of Jaylen Warren. You cannot trade him now. God, no.
I'm curious to see where his ADP settles here in like drafts that are happening at the moment, because I don't know if you said it on the show or before we're recording, but when you have those guys in drafts that have the little health thing next to them, the little, injury marker, people get scared and those guys fall deeper. And I could see that happening with somebody like Warren, which could make him that value, which is kind of what I'm anticipating happening here.
Yeah, just in the last few days, Najee Harris's ADP at the FFPC has barely budged. It's up on Underdog. It's up on Underdog a few picks in the last few days, but not a lot. Not a lot. So I think most people are ignoring this injury. They're not taking it seriously. They're thinking that Warren will be back week 1 because that's what the coaches said. Right? So it's a real difficult situation where I see a lot of analysts that follow all the beat writers, and we have 32 beat writers, the podcast on the Player Profiler Network, and this is what a lot of the fantasy analysts tune into. The analysts will sometimes get fooled, right? And sometimes it's the casuals that cash in. The casuals will be like, well, Warren has the red cross next to him. Harris doesn't. I'm not going to draft Warren. I'm just going to draft Harris. And then that ends up being the right move, because most of the time when you draft an injured player in August, you regret it, right? Most of the time. Most of the time, because we're over projecting. Every time we talk to these coaches, they're giving us best case scenario. They're giving us, he's going to be fine. It's just a little tweak. It's just a little this. It's a little that. and then there's some kind of aggravation, and then all of a sudden he's questionable, and you're like, what? So, yeah, sometimes fantasy analysts get a little bit too smart. And it really, I see it the most with these minor injuries that end up becoming a little bit more serious than anyone expected, because they're just so locked in, and there's so much information coming at them, and we're so inundated with information. You can't always be skeptical of what's being reported in terms of the injury timelines. That's why when you looked at this Samuel thing, you were like, wait a second, let me dig into this. Okay, turf toe. Think about his game. Like, that's why we're here full time, going through all these scenarios, trying to think, okay, explain to me the scenario where I'm going to start Jaylen Warren with confidence. Okay, where am I have to draft him? Okay, now what about the scenario with a Jonathan Brooks? Right? At this point, I'd way rather have Jonathan Brooks than Jaylen Warren. Now, the beauty is in a league with your friends or your family, well, Brooks and Warren will be buried because of that red cross next to their name. You'd rather have Brooks, right? I mean,
absolutely. It's not even close, and it's delayed gratification. Like, you're going to have to wait a little while for him to come through for you, and it might be October, it might be November. My guess is it's going to be the second half of the season when you feel really good about having him in your lineup.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I don't even think it's a question. But to speak to your point there, I mean, the draft that I did on the weekend with my buddies from home, Brooks fell, and I couldn't believe that was going on, and was very, very happy to scoop him up in this draft as he dropped. And I think it's exactly what we're saying. It's people just, maybe not having never seen him produce before, when it's a rookie too, and a guy that has that medical cross next to his name, and they just want to go with the names that they feel more confident in, that they've seen out there scoring touchdowns in the NFL before. Brooks is going to be one of those guys very soon. We're just going to get a bit of a slow start to his career because he tore his ACL last year.
Now, Gardner Minshew named the starter. I thought Aiden O'Connell had a real shot at this. I really did. But they must have seen something from Minshew. Maybe it's the mobility. How do you feel about Minshew at the helm in Las Vegas?
I don't think it really matters. Like, my take on this all off season was the quarterback play is going to be a little bit better, I'm guessing, in Vegas this year, just slightly better, because either it's going to be Aiden O'Connell again, and that means that he improved enough to beat out a veteran guy like Minshew, or you have sort of this like baseline quarterback play in Minshew. And he wasn't good last year, but he can keep an offense moving. Like, my bigger concern for Vegas is, now when you throw Brock Bowers in there, you have Adams, you have Bowers, you have Jacoby Myers that had like a sneaky good fantasy season last year. I worry that we don't have that like really focused target share on somebody like Minshew had last year with Michael Pittman. So is that going to be a problem? Now, Devontae Adams could get traded. There's been lots of rumors that, he could get moved before the deadline, depending what's happening, with the Raiders season this year. We'll see what happens there. But that's sort of my concern with the weapons in Vegas, is that now that you add Brock Bowers, are we going to see anybody really step up and get a big enough target share? And mostly I'm talking about Devontae Adams, but is he going to be able to pay off that second round draft pick that you need to use to get him? Like, I don't feel confident in that based on his age, based on the fact that they have more weapons. Even Trey Tucker is getting talked up as their number 3. So Bowers is really the only one that I've been willing to take. And for me, tight end, it's been pretty simple this year. It's been trying to get one of the top 7, and that's Laporta, Kelsey, Andrews, Kincaid, McBride, Kittle, and Kyle Pitts. If I miss out on them, then it's Brock Bowers in like the 9th round, and I'll take the elite prospect with kind of the unknown upside and maybe the potential that Devontae Adams gets traded this year. He's the only one at cost that I've really been interested in that Raiders passing attack. And the Minshew thing, whether it was him or O'Connell, wasn't really going to change much for me in my projections.
I've been talking about fantasy tilts on this show. Just the opportunities and the events on the football field that melt the brains of fantasy gamers. Okay. Now, one of them would be Greg Dortch targets, right? Greg Dortch, no one wants Greg Dortch targets. And when he gets everybody, there's going to be just an avalanche of complaints on social media when Greg Dortch gets his targets, and if he dominates the target share in a particular game, which is going to be a game or two where he leads the team in target share, and it's just no one will be happy. Another one is the aforementioned Las Vegas Raiders, the Michael Mayer red zone targets. This is going to melt brains, man. They're going to melt brains. You got why, man? They got Bowers. Even somebody has Jacoby Myers. Not to mention the second round Devontae Adams, and there's not that many red zone targets in Las Vegas, and so to waste them on Michael Mayer, everyone's gonna be crazy. But this guy was like Mr. Football at Notre Dame. He's gonna command red zone targets. He's gonna be in there. Every formation, okay, every single one. I mean, you could let me know. Podfather at rotowonderworld.com, at fantasy_mansion on Twitter X. Let me know. Let me know during the season when there is not a Michael Mayer on the field inside the 5. If he's not part of that formation, reach out to me and make fun of me and call me out. Hold me accountable for every formation inside the 5 with no Michael Mayer, but I don't think they're going to exist. I can't see it. And that means Michael Mayer red zone targets. That means they're going to drop plays for him. It's not going to be like, a rollout and a back across the body. There's going to be plays drawn up for Michael Mayer inside the 5, and we're going to hate it. But we're not going to hate it, Justin. We're not going to hate it as much as we hate Braylon Allen touchdowns. Braylon Allen touchdowns, when Breece Hall is healthy, will infuriate people because that's first-round capital there. What do you think? Do you have any other fantasy tilts for us?
I don't think that the Braylon Allen thing is really a concern. It's great that he looks amazing as a backup. It's great that they're going to improve in that area, but Breece Hall is incredible. Like, Breece Hall is so good. Like, last year, he comes back. He didn't even have like his full arsenal of weapons, and he was still finding ways to produce last season, sort of, almost while limping out there coming back from the ACL tear. And then at the end of the season, like when he got further removed from that injury, when you assume now, okay, he is finally getting back to form, over the final 5 weeks, the highest scoring fantasy running back, finished as the RB1 or RB2 overall 3 of those final 5 weeks. Not an RB1 or RB2, like the top 2 scoring running backs. He was one of them in 3 of those final 5 weeks. Who was
his quarterback during those times? What was his quarterback's name?
Quarterback was terrible, and now the quarterback is going to be even better. Like, the offense is going to take a huge jump. I talked about the Falcons situation, how bad the quarterback play. There might have been one team that had worse quarterback play, and that's the Jets, right? So Now we're going to have a legitimate quarterback in that offense. That's going to lead to more scoring opportunities. So I'm not worried about Breece at all. I think the take for Allen is that he belongs in the conversation with those other high upside backups in the late rounds, because if something happens to Hall again, which we do not want to see, knock on some wood here, but if Hall goes down again with an injury, based on everything we're hearing about Braylon Allen, he is going to be able to produce. Now, for another tilt, like a thing that I just envision, I know it's going to bother me. I could see it bothering everybody else. It's that Packers offense, because the offense is so good, and yet they have so many pieces in that offense. And the way Matt LaFleur is talking about it is, hey, I don't need to name a number 1 receiver. We have all these great receivers. We're going to use them all. And he's right. Like, in real life, that is the approach. Use all these different weapons, keep everybody engaged, keep everybody involved. And when an injury happens, well, you've been using 4 or 5 receivers, so you're okay. You're just going to keep shuffling guys in and out and going. But man, Jaden Reed, Christian Watson, Romeo Dobbs seems to be a guy that the coaches and the players there love. He's always catching touchdowns from Jordan Love. Dontavian Wicks, the fantasy community, just head over heels for him. Right. All 4 of those guys, really good. Then you look at tight end, Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft. How are they going to be deployed? Is it going to be both of them getting used out there? Then you look at the backfield. It's Josh Jacobs, but when Marshawn Lloyd's healthy, they seem really excited about him getting involved. I'm not so worried about A.J. Dillon. I think we know what A.J. Dillon is at this point, but there are so many different pieces in that offense that the way to play it is maybe just you take Jordan Love and you get to kind of get all of it, and you don't have to make those decisions week to week. But that's what I can totally see everybody on Twitter on Sundays just going, oh my, I can't believe this week it's that guy. I can't believe this week it's that. Like, it's going to happen, and it's going to be frustrating, especially like from my standpoint as somebody that's trying to project the stuff week to week and rank it. I'm also going to be one of those people who's frustrated trying to figure it out. But for the Packers, it's the right approach. For fantasy, it's going to be incredibly tough to deal with.
Tucker Kraft touchdowns, Bo Melton spike weeks, of AJ Dillon touchdowns. There, so I think you're right. There's a lot of value, right? ADP value with the Packers because it's so ambiguous. The target share distribution is as ambiguous as any team. And therefore, there's the most value to be mined from that offense, in particular the passing game. But on the other side, it also has the most tilt equity by far and away. It's just three. There's no other team where you could name 3 players that could tilt the world in any given week. Dillon, Kraft, Melton could all, because you can't say Wicks because the fantasy football community's been on this guy for 6 months. I've been sweating this guy for 6 months. If anything, it's Dobbs. This Romeo Dobbs character, he's the one that's going to tilt me. The Romeo Dobbs touchdowns will tilt me personally, though I know he does have a few fans out there. So I know he's not. There's certainly going to be people happy. It's not going to be 100% tilt on the Dobbs, but man, personally, he's going to be one of my big tilts this year.
I could see of those 4 receivers, and I should have mentioned Bo Melton, very small sample size last year, but he also did some things that look good. But of those top 4, I could see them finish in any order for fantasy this year, and I would not be surprised. Like, this could turn out a variety of different ways. And man, the people who are taking like the guys at the top, I really like Jaden Reed, but if I'm going to do it, I'm going to go after probably Wicks, and even potentially at this point, based on what we're hearing, I might be more willing to draft Romeo Dobbs because you're getting them so much cheaper that there's just no risk involved compared to having to draft Reed or potentially Watson up in those higher rounds where I think there's still a lot of other players in that range that could pay off for you.
Yeah, the other tilt that I talk about is the Ray Davis high value touches, because there's certainly a James Cook hive out there, and I'm not one of them by any means. So here's the difference. Okay, here's the difference. I don't think James Cook is that good, and I get frustrated by the fact that James Cook gets the bare minimum for opportunities that he has, where you see these wide open running lanes and like he basically guides himself into the sideline. And you're like, this guy could have got an extra 5 yards. I adore Breece Hall. I'm just terrified of what the usage is going to be, knowing that they drafted 2 running backs, one of them being like this like uber Wisconsin workhorse. And I've seen this movie before with NFL coaches, and I don't trust them. That's the big difference. I am actively rooting for Ray Davis to take over that backfield. Nothing would make me happier, right? And because he's older, because he's 24 years old, he's more seasoned, he's more ready. If he were 21 years old trying to pick up an NFL offense, it's a little harder. The fact that he's 24, he's actually better positioned as a pass blocker and just be a little more seasoned to get and earn the trust of the coaches and the teammates to get in there in these high value situations. So that one I think is even easier to imagine, the Ray Davis targets and the Ray Davis carries inside the 5 with no James Cook in sight. That I could see, and then I'm actually happy because I have a lot more Davis than Cook, and so there's going to be a bunch of us that are very happy about this, but it will tilt the James Cook hive, whereas I'm actively rooting for the workhorse Breece Hall. I just don't trust the NFL.
If he's healthy, I cannot imagine a scenario where they're going to take Breece Hall off the field enough that we're going to get that upset for fantasy. Like, you're talking about one of your top offensive players, one of, if not the best running back in the league. Like, he is in that conversation. The Jets know that. They're going to be excited to have him healthy as long as he's healthy. That's the big thing. As long as he doesn't get dinged up, as long as he's not, nursing some sort of injury, and then they try to go light on him. And I think that's like when we're talking about Ray Davis, the Bills, it's a very smart pick for them. Like, they needed a guy that can help establish that running game, that can be that sustaining back. They didn't have him. Cook's not that guy. Cook is definitely not that guy. Davis is. I don't think he overtakes Cook, but he could certainly make that more of a committee than what Cook's had to deal with before. But, Latavius Murray in this offense was doing a little something for fantasy. Ray Davis is like an upgrade on that.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, definitely one of those names to consider in the late rounds for sure.
And we talked about this earlier, that the Bills are going to have to be in comeback mode. They're going to be throwing the ball. They're not going to have the luxury of running the ball as much this year. And James Cook had the opportunity last year, and he was not elusive. He was, given his athletic profile, guys like that really should be translating that speed and burst into more tackle breaking and more breakaway runs, and he just didn't deliver. He didn't translate his athleticism into on-field performance and efficiency the way he could have. And if you're, in your 20s and your second year in the league, early 20s, that year is a huge judgment year, especially for people in our seats, where now I can say, okay, I now have a much clearer idea and enough sample to judge James Cook for what he is, and I'm sure as hell not going to be burning 4th round capital on a guy like that. It's terrifying. Guys like that are terrifying. I would rather, in the dead zone at ADP, I would rather burn a 7th rounder on Najee Harris than a 4th rounder on a James Cook. Every single time. I'll take the dusty, crusty dude a couple rounds later, as opposed to jumping up and taking that slasher who has been underwhelming in pretty much every phase of the game, just based on the athletic profile. I'm not doing that anymore. I don't play that game anymore. That's what I used to do 5 years ago. I ain't that guy anymore, Justin.
Well, it just comes down to what you can get in those rounds instead of those guys, right? And the receivers who are available in like the 3rd into the 4th round, there's still some really great receivers there. So, and guys that you feel incredibly confident in that they're going to produce for you, that there's just no reason to take a shot on a running back. In my mind, like a Rachaad White too, I would put in that conversation. Like these guys that you're just worried about, are they going to be able to replicate what they did last year? I'd rather take the receiver in that range and then just go heavy at running back when you get to the 6th, 7th, 8th round and beyond.
I'm not worried about Kenneth Walker. I'm not worried about Rachaad White, and I'm still drafting a guy like Christian Kirk because I want the build. I want the right build. And if you want a guy that's going to be productive this year, I give you Christian Kirk. I think we know if he's healthy, Christian Kirk is going to be productive. How could he not be? In what world is he not? Calvin Ridley's gone. Last time I checked, there's no Calvin Ridley. I'm looking. Tell me how Chris Godwin doesn't produce. Tell me how Deontay Johnson doesn't produce. Tell me.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's excellent receivers.
That's what I want. We wanted silence, and that's what we got.
There are excellent receivers. That's why I'm saying you got to just focus on receivers early in your builds here, because there's so many guys that are guaranteed volume that have produced before for fantasy, and they're going to be able to do it again rather than taking a shot on some of these running backs that we have some concerns about.
So now I got 10 burning questions for Justin Boone. 10 burning questions for Justin Boone after this. Hey, why do we partner with the FFPC? Because they have the widest variety of fantasy football formats, and it's the easiest place to find all types of fantasy football contests in the world. What if you want to play for high stakes? Well, they have a $6 million prize pool with their Fantasy Players Championship. They also have way too early best ball leagues that start in February and Dynasty leagues. They have the closest thing to a liquid market for orphans that there is in all of Dynasty. And the FFPC has sponsored us for half a decade because we are actually delivering information that can help fantasy gamers, and they're generating so much interest and bringing in so many new users, casual users even. The FFPC creates a unique experience where you can both compete against the best and make money. Use promo code UNDERWORLD to get $25 off your first team. $25 off your first team at the FFPC with promo code UNDERWORLD. Go get it! Oh, 10 burning questions. But first, a question from the chat. For you, Justin Boone, Brian Thomas or Keon Coleman?
Oh, it's Brian Thomas. I have much more faith that Brian Thomas, even as like a boomer bust guy, is going to have opportunity to get behind defenses, is going to be able to put up some stats this year. It might not be consistent, but that's okay if we're talking about a flex probably based on where you can get him. So yeah, it's certainly Brian Thomas.
Too easy. Too easy.
It was.
Too easy.
It was.
Now, so chat, bring harder questions, please. Thank you. Now, this spread them and shred them attack that so many of these NFL teams are employing, it actually makes our jobs as analysts harder to project these guys. So, do you believe that for the average fantasy gamer that also means it's more fun because we're just not sure what's going to happen? It's more randomness. There's more players that are fringe that are jumping up and having spike weeks. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the people that will be more and more frustrated by the way the NFL is going with that are going to be the analysts and the people who are trying to project this stuff and forecast the future. It becomes a way more difficult scenario to do that when you have a bunch of different guys, 5, 6 sometimes different guys touching the ball in a given week on offense. Whereas just judging on home leagues that I have, friends who I know that play fantasy, I think they're going to love the aspect that's going to bring to the game where it's going to be way more random week to week. And, it'll throw projections on different sites way off, but I already tell people don't really pay attention to a lot of that stuff. If you're playing on these different fantasy sites, don't, just build your lineup based on, oh my God, this guy's projected for 12 points this week and that one's projected for 10. Don't do that. Take a look around the industry at a variety of sources. Come up with your own decisions about it. To me, that's the fun way to play the game that always was, to try to come up with my own opinion on everything. And that's why when people ask me, even the last question there, this guy or that guy, I'll give you my opinion, but don't just go off of what I'm going to say. Take that as one data point, look at other research, and then choose for yourself. That's the most fun way to play for me. But yeah, I'm a little bit worried about, where this is all going for the NFL in terms of just having so many different offenses that are going to be these wide open attacks where they might not have that, top guy that's going to get double-digit targets every week. They might rotate guys. They might, throw the ball just a handful of times to a bunch of different guys every week. I don't know. I don't know what it's going to look like, but we'll take the challenge when it gets here.
I know what's going to look like with the Bills in the back of the end zone.
It's okay. Josh Allen will be running the ball in when he sees that.
He's going to see that. He's going to run it in. We know he's going to do.
Exactly.
Or maybe, actually, what would be amazing is a little forward pitch to Ray Davis or Dalton Kincaid, right? Just a little. Caleb Williams did that. Just a little. Caleb Williams got a little Aaron Rodgers in him. I don't know if I'm crazy. Let me know in the chat. Anyone agree? Caleb Williams, his throwing motion, is just his movement. A little Aaron Rodgers in him. So
yeah, he looks great.
Yeah, I was like, it was funny. Like he had an incompletion or a couple incompletions during Hard Knocks, and I'm watching it with my daughter, and she's like, "Oh, he's overrated, isn't he?" And I was like, "Whoa, hot taker. He's a rookie. I think he's doing great. What do you mean he's overrated? What's going on? You got to dial down the take meter over there." I love it. But I was like, don't lose the energy. I love that your default mode is player X is overrated. You'll go a long way in this business with that default mode. But with the 101 overall, and these are different. You gotta be a little more. Maybe take your foot off the gas here and there when you're going around these corners. But overall, that's a great mode. That's a great default mode. Player X is overrated. I love it. Now, we're looking at rookies. This is a good rookie class. This is a nice little rookie class. We're going to see some of these, day 3 running backs pop. Who is the under the radar rookie that you think is going to make an impact this year that the average person really isn't thinking about? And it can't be Kamani Vidal because in Lobby we've talked about them, so they're off the board. Who would it be?
I'm going to go way deep on this. This guy's probably more of like a deep dynasty stash. You might not even pop in redraft, but
please.
Casey Washington on the Falcons.
Okay.
Their number 4 receiver right now. He's already been working his way up the depth chart. Did not have huge college numbers, was a 5-year prospect. Just a lot of things to not like in the pre-draft process. But he finishes his college career. He has this monster game, 9 catches, 218 yards, 3 touchdowns. He runs a 4.46 at his pro day. So that's just to give you an idea of who we're talking about. Not that those are all going to be reasons that you're going to go after him. But then he gets to Atlanta and you start to hear the buzz. Beat writers saying that he's standing out in practice. Drake London saying that he's been killing it in practices this summer. So I like to hear that. Rondale Moore gets hurt. Rondale Moore out of the picture now. Who is the Falcons' number 3 receiver at the moment? It's Ray McLeod. Are we really betting that Ray McLeod is going to hold on to that job this year? I'm not so sure. And when you look at what the Falcons are doing, they bring over Zach Robinson, who's a Sean McVay disciple. That to me means that if he is going to follow in Sean McVay's footsteps, they're going to play a lot of 3 receiver sets. They're going to need a guy who's going to be out there that can actually get something done. Ray McLeod has not shown us in his career that he's going to be a consistent producer. I think Casey Washington is eventually going to be the number 3 receiver in that offense. And then from there, all it takes is an injury to Darnell Mooney, an injury to Drake London, and this guy could really blow up. So he's somebody that I'm stashing in every dynasty league. He's probably available in most dynasty leagues out there right now. And a guy that I think could pop up in my waiver wire column this year. Somebody that I think could have some fantasy value coming out of nowhere.
Andre Iosivas will seize that number 3 job in Cincinnati, which also means that Casey Washington will likely outproduce Jermaine Burton this year. Sounds like a hot take as it rolls out of my mouth, from my lips to this microphone, to your ears, but it's actually not that hot. That's the thing. It's actually not hot at all. It's probably likely, right? Iosivas is another guy that you could absolutely see being in your waiver wire column multiple weeks.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they seem to love him there. And yeah, I think most people are focused on Jermaine Burton, but Jermaine Burton to me is the T. Higgins replacement next year, right? They're not going to bring T. Higgins back. We'll see what happens with the Jamar Chase. There's constant reports about that now. That might become the new Brandon Aiyuk situation where we're hearing about that all the time. Is Chase going to, play? Is he not? All that sort of stuff. I hope they're going to get that figured out. But assuming everybody's out there this year, assuming Chase is out there, Higgins is out there, Iosivas seems like he is going to be the number 3. And that means Burton is just going to be this guy who comes in for, specific 4 receiver plays and stuff like that and rotates in when guys need a break. And unless there's an injury, I don't know that we're going to see that big, Burton breakout. But next season, absolutely, he's got a great shot. Meanwhile, the number 3 spot in Cincinnati for fantasy, it hasn't been that great. I know people point to Tyler Boyd, and we always remember the games where he had a couple touchdowns and blew up. But when those other 2 are healthy, the number 3 receiver in Cincinnati, the tight ends in Cincinnati, not somewhere that I've really been investing in because those top 2 are so great. But dynasty wise, yes, Yoshi, they like to call him. For sure him. And I still think Burton as well. I think Burton's going to step into a great role. It's just going to happen next year.
Yeah, like Mario Kart, Yoshi. Now, good question from the chat from Charlie. Zach Moss or Chase Brown?
So another tough one to figure out, and another one where, I feel a little bit similar to the Steelers situation where I've changed my view on it. At the beginning of the offseason, I was like, okay, they brought in Zach Moss, Moss is going to get the touchdowns. Moss will probably be the lead back. And based on how they used Chase Brown last year, he's just going to be this sort of gadget guy that'll come in and be the complementary piece. Everything we've heard in the offseason, though, is they like Chase a whole bunch. The team is very excited about him. We have other players on the team, like Orlando Brown, the offensive lineman, saying that he'd be drafting Chase. He'd be taking him in fantasy drafts. So now I'm starting to look at it a little different. I think it's going to be a lot closer to 50-50. And in my mind, that points me towards the guy who's more explosive, the guy who I think has more of a chance to actually be that breakout player. And that's Chase Brown to me. So he's the one that I've been taking. He's been cheaper in fantasy drafts. But I do think it's going to be a committee backfield where potentially both guys could pay off here. Like RB3s with like RB2 upside. Joe Mixon was an RB1 last season for fantasy. So there's a lot of value here. The offense is probably going to be better now that Joe Burrow's back. I think both guys could produce.
You have to draft a Bengals running back in every draft. You cannot leave a draft without a Bengals running back. You can't draft both. Just pick one. Do multiple drafts. Do a bunch of drafts and have a Chase team and a Moss team and a Chase team and a Moss team and a Chase team and a Moss team and a Chase team and a Moss team. I've drafted Najee Harris as well, but it's a better value on these Bengals running backs. It's a better situation. It's better all around, and they're super inexpensive. I think we're being punked here. I'm like, is there a third running back that we don't know about? How are they this cheap? This makes no sense. I'm loving it.
The only thing that could throw it off is if they bring someone else in, and that's very possible because there isn't a number 3 back at all there. It's Travion Williams, who's like more of a special teamer. Chris Evans got hurt. There really isn't anybody else. So could that be a landing spot for one of these veterans that gets cut? Or it's possible, and then we'll see what happens. But right now, I think both those guys could be valuable. And there's multiple backfields in that range of drafts that we can target. The Titans are like that. You mentioned the Steelers. There's a few different backfields where you just take a shot. This is
the arbitrage on those backfields because it's cheaper.
Yeah. Yep. Like I got Moss outside of the top, I think the top 10 rounds in a recent draft that I did this weekend. And
bingo.
I guess that's because the Chase Brown hype. But I'll take that, even though I'm not like super excited about it. He could have a great touchdown total this year. They could both pay off. So yeah, that's the way to play it. Make sure you're loading up in those rounds on running backs.
It's the backfield with the highest probability of 2 of the running backs paying off. Absolutely. Man, maybe Bijan and Tyler Algier as well, just because that offense is going to be great.
It's going to be really good.
Atlanta. So that's the other one I can see. But yes, I mean, that's just easy. And what I can tell you from my understanding of how the mechanics work and the politics work and what the coaches are thinking is this Chase Brown guy's raw, and we want to give him reps with the ones, and Zach Moss doesn't need the reps. And we don't need Zach Moss dinging up a shoulder. We get a shallow running back room. The last thing we need is Zach Moss getting hurt in preseason or training camp. So he's a professional. He's going to be ready for week 1. We're not worried about it. And we're going to give Chase Brown all the reps so that he can get better. He keeps showing up early and leaving late and asking for more touches, and we're going to keep giving him touches because we believe he can get better. Even if he isn't instinctual, he can learn how to, start to translate that athleticism into better performances on the field. But he needs the reps. Moss doesn't need the reps. That's why you're not going to get you don't want to get too fooled, into sidestepping Zach Moss with the banana in the tailpipe of all the Chase Brown reps with the ones. You don't want to get fooled by that. You just want to draft both. You want to, hey, he's getting better, but also they're preserving this other guy for all the right reasons. We don't know exactly how the touch share is gonna shake down, but we know they're both incredible values. Now, there is going to be some surprise cut. Who's your guy that you think is like the surprise cut for camp this year?
I mean, it's probably going to be one of these running backs. Like, would it be surprising if Khalil Herbert gets let go? Like, I know he was out there getting reps with the starting offense, but everything I read really makes it seem like it's DeAndre Swift, then it's Roschon Johnson, and then it's Khalil Herbert. So will they keep him because they think they're going to contend for a playoff spot? He gives them depth. Is he going to be happy in that role? I'm not so sure. I really got the impression that they were giving him reps with the ones in hopes that maybe they could trade him before having to cut him. But
go.
we'll see. I guess like he would be up there. I don't think it would be surprising based on what we've seen from Dameon Pierce in Houston that just hasn't really seemed like a fit in that offense last year. I know Joe Mixon's been banged up, but this preseason, it's kind of been more of the same. And Pierce is somebody that I could totally see go to another offense and start to succeed, right? Like we saw him do it during that rookie season. He's not a terrible running back, just doesn't seem to be a great fit in their system. So it's probably going to be one of those backs. And I'm interested to see like whether anybody's fantasy value in another backfield gets just completely nuked based on somebody changing teams, right? A Samaje Perine, ends up back on the Bengals, for example. Does that change
come on,
things?
we just had this conversation. You're hurting me.
Do we see that happen with any of these backfields?
No.
Could Dameon Pierce go to the Cowboys and all of a sudden in a few weeks he's the lead back there? That's one of the fun things that we get to try to figure out before the season. That's also why I do a waiver wire column before week 1 to try to help figure out some of that stuff that goes down after the cut day.
That would hurt. That would hurt my soul.
It's going to happen somewhere.
What about Dennis Allen infuriating the front office and just saying, I know this is my last year. I know that I am just the placeholder coach while we try to rebuild on the fly and we pretend to be competitive, but we're actually tanking. I get it all. But for now, I am the decider, and Kendre Miller is gone.
That's one of those situations where I really hope, like, he is very strange in his media appearances where like he talks so negatively about the players. I'm hoping that was one of those like motivational situations where he was trying to get Kendre Miller going and, get him to fight through some injuries. Cause the guy's talented. Like he's somebody that if he gets cut, I'll be all over that. Like I want to see where he ends up because I'm going to chase that for sure for fantasy. That would definitely be a surprise, I think. Cause right now you have to figure he's the heir apparent to Kamara, whether it's, next year, probably next year, maybe the year after. But yeah, I would be very stunned if the Saints move on from him, despite what he said and some of those media appearances in the last few weeks.
Stranger things. Stranger things. Stranger things. And wouldn't it be just so NFL for them to like cut Miller to get like a Perine? I mean, just you're just like, and you guys are trying to rebuild under the radar, and you're doing these moves that just make people crazy. You're making heads explode. But that's the thing. Like when I tell people that aren't necessarily like big NFL fans, I'm like, so what's up with the NFL? I'm like, you would be shocked about the inefficient, suboptimal decisions that are just easy to see coming that these NFL teams make, and they're just so head-scratching. You can't believe it. In the moment, when the Panthers traded all those picks, right, and DJ Moore as a throw-in, I'm like, you can't just throw in DJ Moore, because I know how the conversation went, because now we're very fortunate. We got the behind-the-scenes look at the Giants front office and how these conversations play out. That's how it plays out, man. All right, I like it. I think it's okay. I need a little throw in. Throw in DJ Moore. You have a deal. Oh, just DJ. Oh, yeah, I guess we can throw in DJ Moore. Whoa, hey, what are you doing? No, what are you doing? Like, did you stop to add up what the hell is on your side of the ledger that you're giving up? Holy shit, this is terrible. What are you doing, insanity, man? Wild. So now they're stuck in this situation, but we take advantage by drafting Deontay Johnson, because we know if there's one thing that Bryce Young's going to be able to do, it's target Deontay Johnson this year. So he needs to be top 50. IMO, Deontay Johnson, top 50. And there's plenty of guys like Johnson, Godwin, Kirk that I mentioned earlier, where I think PPR leagues, these are top 50 guys for me. Maybe not other people, but like, and then they might be considered gross or, a little crusty, and that's okay. I'm old and crusty now too. So these are some of the guys that I'm embracing that. All these high stakes players that I have always looked up to and admired, they're the ones that are taking the Najee Harrises, and they are. And, and we're sitting there like, ew, and then they win, and that's what happens. So who are your guys? It doesn't have to be any kind of gross, could be sexy. I don't know, sexy, gross, whatever it is. Do you have a couple guys in the top 50 that you're really bullish on?
Yeah, I mean, we could rattle off a bunch.
Garrett
Wilson.
I would jump around to get this guy. Like me, I would jump around to get Neighbors.
Garrett Wilson, I think we've just been waiting for the quarterback situation to improve. He's going to absolutely blow up. I think by the end of the season, he's going to be in the conversation with the uber elites at wide receiver. Jonathan Taylor. I don't know why people are forgetting how good Jonathan Taylor can be in that up-tempo Shane Steichen offense with Anthony Richardson coming back and kind of lifting the potential for the offense with their offensive line being a thing again. They had a down year. They were able to retool. They brought back all 5 starters. That line is a top 5 unit again in the NFL. Jonathan Taylor last year, he had the contract thing. He had the injury stuff at the beginning of the year. They slowly ramped him up over the course of a couple games. Over the final 12 weeks of the season, he was the RB3 in fantasy points per game and half PPR. I think he could put himself right back up there near the top with all the running backs up there, the Breece Halls and the Bijan Robinsons, and even potentially with CMC. We'll see what he does this year. Malik Neighbors, we don't have to spend much time on that one. Just an elite talent, an elite prospect, and a guy who's going to get so much volume, and that's what we're chasing. We're chasing that guy who's going to get incredible volume. Don't know how his ADP is in the 4th round in some leagues. And, you're talking about high stake leagues and some of the best ball leagues that have been going all off season. He goes in the late 2nd into the early 3rd round a lot of times. So right there with him. DK Metcalf, another one kind of like Kenneth Walker, where the coaching staff is saying, we want to give him as many targets as we can. They talked about moving him around the formation and trying to make it harder for defenses to key on him. So I think DK Metcalf and that new Ryan Grubb offense is going to blow up. And then Dalton Kincaid, I think he sneaks into that top 50 there. And for all the reasons that we said earlier, I mean, the guy could potentially finish as the top tight end overall in fantasy this year.
And, we cry a little bit about, the NFL with these spread attacks are making our life harder with the more volatile target share distribution. Wah. But we have fun, man. We have fun. Like I was on the plane with Theo. We're creating new, content premises, right? Like the whole biggest tilts. What are the biggest tilts? Hey, Michael Mayer. Who doesn't want to talk about Michael Mayer red zone targets? Are just fun to talk about. I changed my Twitter handle to Michael Mayer red zone targets just because it's everybody knows. If you follow me on Twitter X, when I say Michael Mayer red zone targets, it's like a hellscape. It's not good. And it's just fun to think about. It's fun to put these top 5 lists together. I think this is what we do. And so I came up with one that I think is unique and funny. LSU Tigers stacks in the NFL. Right? Where I got Jaden Daniels. Listen to this, Justin. I got Jaden Daniels. I'm stacking Neighbors with Daniels, Brian Thomas. I mean, how could this? These are some great best ball stacks. I have, and you put it out there, on a Twitter X. You're like, hey, I love stacking in best ball. I'm on Underdog and I'm stacking Daniels with Neighbors and Thomas, and I think this is a real winner. And this not a stat stud. They're not on the same team. It's I get it, dude, but it's still fun to talk about. They just happen to be guys I love at their particular ADPs. I mean, I think Brian Thomas is the last receiver I would draft in a managed league before I convert my selections to running back only, because that upside, the potential there that he actually does take over in the second half for Christian Kirk as the go-to, it's very possible. Very possible. He would have been more productive if he wasn't sharing a field with a godlike creature and Malik Neighbors. And if you want to go a step further, and then you could stack him with Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. These are LSU stacks I can believe in, but where does it all start? Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels, unfortunately, because he's a rookie, he gets these preseason reps, and then they let the secret out. So the secret got let out. It's a bummer, right?
Yeah, the ADP started to move up a little bit, and it's unfortunate. But again, because there's so many good quarterbacks this year, it can't move up that far, right? Like he's not going to get up and move up, in front of some of the, top 5, top 6, top 7 guys. So he is still a value, but yeah, the price got a little higher in the last few weeks.
Yeah, right. We got rapid fire. Rapid fire, got to get you out of here. You got to go. So we're going to get a couple questions rapid fire. What are the chances Kyle Pitts outscores Drake London?
I think it's pretty slim. Like, I don't think it's going to happen. But again, I think that offense is going to be so much better than people realize this year. So I think both guys are going to hit. I'm targeting them both in drafts. The chances of Pitts outscoring London, though, are still pretty low in my mind.
Now, middle round wide receiver, I love McConkey. I think his upside is incredible. Who do you got in terms of middle round receiver with the ridiculous upside?
Are we still counting like Xavier Worthy in that range? Because
there was an injury to Marquise Brown.
I mean, Xavier Worthy.
This is one of those things where I thought the Xavier Worthy ADP move would be greater. It's not.
It hasn't really.
It hasn't moved as much as I thought, and I think that's a real opportunity.
But think about like Tank Dell last year. Like, yes, he got hurt, but before Tank Dell got hurt, he was the wide receiver 10 in fantasy points per game over the first 12 weeks. You're telling me that Worthy can't do that this season? Like, especially with Hollywood Brown injured at the beginning of the year? Like, the fact that the Chiefs are putting him right out there and they're not doing that like really slow ramp up like they did with Rashee Rice last season, like, I could totally see Worthy blow up from that spot.
I mean, let's look just real quick. If we gotta, I would absolutely love to post this, but I think if I go here, we're just gonna, see this is where they're just gonna show that again, and that's not nice. But if we go here, and we switch it over to Xavier Worthy, look at this ADP. Look at this. It's 57.1. It's up from 64 on Underdog. This is where I was thinking the spike would happen. It didn't happen. I thought he'd be vaulted. It didn't happen. I didn't get to see it. It hasn't happened. This is good. This is an opportunity. Look at that. I'm in. Final question. Justin Boone, get you out of here. Bold prediction for this season.
You do this to me every time.
Yes.
Let's go back to the Jonathan Brooks thing. I think in the second half of the season, Jonathan Brooks is going to be a top 10 fantasy tight end. You just have to wait on it. The improvements that they made to the offensive line, the trust that I have that Dave Canales is going to work his magic there like he's done the last 2 seasons, last 3 seasons, really going back to Seattle, then with Tampa. He's going to start to work that a little bit with the Panthers this year. Brooks, a 3-down talent. He's so young, 21 years old. That's going to help with the recovery from the ACL tear. In the second half of the year, people are going to regret that they did not take that discount and draft him like we talked about earlier.
From the Podfather to you, I deeply appreciate you tuning in. And many ask, what can I do? What can I do to help support the hosts, the research they do, the production costs? Go to playerprofiler.com, Dynasty Deluxe, World Famous Draft Kit, Rankings, DFS Dominator, and of course, data analysis. Subscribe to any one of those, and you support all of us and take Player Profiler to the moon.